What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 353. My favorite kind of episode where it's the same forwards and backwards. They call them palindromes.
Okay.
My name's Steve. I'm one of the co-hosts of the show. And as always, I'm joined by
Ron.
And John.
guys. How are you doing today? Doing
Good.
Feeling pretty good.
Good. Relaxed.
Ron, you look good. You look good today. Yeah, you look really relaxed is a good word.
Yeah.
You look
'Cause I was
charged a little bit.
stressed out. Yeah. I was so stressed out about that whole, I was rushing because I got a new computer and the dock that I was using for it. So I have a new strategy. What I'm going to do is use my current small computer. Once we record it, put it on a flash drive, and then take it to the one that I'm going to edit on. I don't have to be beholden to this fancy new computer.
Yeah, you do what you got to do.
I don't know it's shit. I don't know that computer anything.
It keeps you in control though, too. You know, don't let it control you.
I won't let it
The
control.
great thing about talking about this stuff on the show is that if any listener can improve on our workflow, they just heard what Ronald's workflow is.
Yeah.
So if any listener wants to help, I imagine we might have some tech-minded.
Absolutely.
Out there.
So some actuallys in the listener.
Well, that's not the most efficient way to do it. And even people with deep voices who know a lot about technology.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
All right. We got a fun episode planned for tonight. So we're going to start off as always, with the required viewing. This week's movie is Magic. John picked it last week. This is from 1978. Just in case you're IMDbing this film as you listen to this podcast. We'll get into that in a moment. And then we're going to go right into a review for the new Billy Eichner comedy rom-com from Nicholas Stoller called Bros, which by the time you're listening to this episode is available digitally, which is we'll get into that even during the review. And then we're going to round out the episode with the final Halloween film, at least for the near future, I guess. The last of the trilogy that David Gordon Green directed. Jamie Lee Curtis is in as Laurie Strode. Came out last Friday in theaters and on Peacock. Halloween Ends. We're going to kind of wrap the episode up with a review of that. But let's get into Magic. John, talk about Magic again briefly. Tell us why you picked it, and let's jump into that.
Well, Magic is a movie from 1978 that was written by the great William Goldman. If you want to see why I say the great, just look at the other screenplays he wrote. And it's also based on a book that he wrote called Magic. So I actually read the book in the last week, so I was looking for that, like how faithful of an adaptation is this movie on top of other things. But this is just a movie that was around when I was a kid, in the tradition of Ronald's pick last time, Never-Ending Story. Or was it Steve's pick? Steve's pick last time, Never-Ending Story. It was such a never-ending story, I forgot who started it. But I watched that as a movie checked out at the library when I was a kid, and that feeling sort of accidentally. I had already chosen Magic, but Magic is another movie that I remember, either the library or the Video Express. That was a movie that made it home, and it was sort of like I was allowed. I don't know. I was in my teens when that one. I was a little bit older. I was not like 11 or 12 when I watched it, but it was definitely one that my parents had seen and that they thought I would enjoy, and so, that was where it was for me. It's like, it had that stamp of approval of my parents think this is a pretty good movie or a pretty creepy movie. But I do think I was a little bit older and I was maybe past some of my can't sleep at night stuff, because I don't think my parents would have recommended this to me when I was so it might have even been like older teens. My point being, I remember seeing this movie that time and then maybe a couple years later in college and still thinking, oh yeah, this is this movie holds up. And then it's been what now, 27 years or something like that since I've watched it. So it's just a movie I remembered being creepy. I remembered it being like, at the time when I watched it, it was that little bit, it's like from that era, that late 70s era where they were making a lot of some of the movies that are still creepy to people, the movies that still hold up. And I think this was a movie made, this is a really well-made movie. I mean, this is a reasonably budgeted movie. It's made with a certain amount of polish. So it makes me think of other movies like The Exorcist or The Shining or something like that, where it's like, oh, here was a studio picture, but it was also a creepy movie. It was kind of for its time, elevated horror, so to speak, because it's got great actors things I remember loving about it when I was a kid. If people don't know what we're talking about and they didn't bother to watch it, it's the story. It's a pretty simple idea, right? Basically, it's a magician whose act is flopping, and so he brings an insulting ventriloquist dummy into his act that is named Fats, and that personality of Fats becomes like the heart of his act, and it gets him onto like the talk shows and maybe poises him to be ready to do a television special. And then there's the question of his mental health going into that television special, and that's when he kind of cuts bait and leaves town and catches up with an old girlfriend played by Anne Margaret. So it's Anthony Hopkins and Anne Margaret, and then Burgess Meredith as the guy's manager who comes looking for him is great. And it's just this question you have throughout the movie of, is he just a broken person? Is there actually some sort of other personality he slips into or that exists because of this doll? It's a good, unreliable narrator kind of movie where they're shooting things so that you're not seeing moments. It's a little bit like Calvin and Hobbes or something like that, where you're seeing the doll laying there and you're knowing that the kid's imagination is bringing it to life, but every now and then it seems like the doll is doing something when the man is not controlling it. And so it keeps that kind of mystery alive of just, is this some kind of supernatural occurrence with this ventriloquist dummy, that's stuff that's going on, or is it Anthony Hopkins just really having a mental break, and then bodies start piling up. So yeah, I mean, I felt like this movie in a lot of ways really held up as like the pacing and the tension of it. And I think, you talk about Anthony Hopkins playing almost, it felt like a tribute to Norman Bates, which is coincidental that we've watched Psycho 2 as a selection. Right. There was this idea that we have this nervous, kind of nerdy, awkward protagonist who is very quickly revealed to be mentally unstable, yeah, he made me nervous. What did you guys think of Anthony Hopkins' performance? What did you think of this movie?
Go ahead, Steve. Oh, you want me to go? I'll go. Yeah. I don't know if I've ever seen something where I've seen Anthony Hopkins so untethered. And I see what you mean. Like, man, he made me feel crazy because I'm like, he's so erratic all the time, which I really enjoyed. And his manager almost said, "You're a bum, Rock," as he's talking to him. Burgess Meredith. His voice is incredible.
God, he's great in this.
He's so good, man. He's so sleazy. But there's like a moral code to it, man. He's like, I need you to be healthy. I need you to be mentally okay when you do this stuff. One of the things that really stands out to me that, like, I mean, just as a performer, the thing that when he first introduces Fats, what he does is just so genius that I think it could work now. Just the idea of somebody kind of calling from the back of the room, insulting you, and you go back to basically beat the hell out of them, and it's a puppet. Like, I knew that I was watching something that was a little more elevated at that point. Not just the way it was filmed, but just the acting. And Margaret, just a gorgeous, gorgeous woman. She kind of looked like Carey Mulligan to me in the movie, like just kind of the way that the kind of sweet sort of personality.
Well, you could definitely imagine a reboot of this movie with Carey Mulligan in that role.
Carey Mulligan, that's
a good call.
But the chemistry with the two of them, and man, I think. Okay, this is the last thing I'll say because I feel like I'm rambling, but I think I just like this more than I could have ever imagined. When the scene when they saw each other and then they each went to their rooms and like, fuck, they didn't remember who I was. I thought that was so cool because it's something that you don't really see and even rom-coms that's done well. And it pulled it off somehow. It's just like, man, I know that feeling of being out and, as a Marylander and seeing somebody you used to go to school with. And it's like, man, does this person know that they affected me in a great way? Like, I really like being around them, or the opposite. And it's weird. You just pass somebody just like, hey, what's up? And just like, or don't say anything at all. So
Well, there's that thing. The weirdest form of that is when you choose not to talk to somebody,
yes,
and then you walk away feeling kind of funny, like should I have just said hello to that person? And then you go, wait, did they recognize me as well? And they didn't talk to me. What's their fucking problem? You know, so it's this weird back and forth. But I'll tell you this: in the book, Ronald, the one chapter is from his point of view, and he goes back to the bungalow, and he's kind of talking to himself and to the puppet. So it's not weird to hear him say it out loud. But he's like, gosh, she didn't remember me. And that's when you, the reader, realize that, because in the book, it's much more spelled out. There's been a lot of flashbacks already of his his teen years and what happened in high school. So both Duke and Peggy are like characters we know already, you know, from the past.
Okay.
And the whole thing about Duke having this beautiful head of hair and looking, in the book, it's Elvis Presley that he looks like, and she goes off, marries him right after high school when he's like the star athlete and stuff. And so the movie does all that, but it's like spelled out in little dialogue. But then the next chapter begins with her inside, and I think it's like the first sentence is, "He doesn't remember me," and she's saying it to herself in the mirror. And it's kind of so it's like the book manages to do the same thing the movie did, of like giving you the moment and then boom, boom, and that cut. I do think that it felt like you were watching something, at least something. I mean, again, William Goldman is a great screenwriter, so maybe it's not surprising that he would structure this well and like make those little reveals work. But the fact that itself is kind of like a reveal. Oh, this is not just a random thing. This is a person he has a past with. If you like earlier, he's got her. It's kind of creepy. He's got her like high school yearbook picture in front of his dressing room mirror in one of the earlier scenes.
Oh wow.
So, and there's a little bit in the book too. He's a little too fixated on how this woman looked when she was, quote, 15. I think the author was just trying to make it like when he had the crush on her, but it feels a little bit like, what's his name? Humbert from Lolita, where it's like this guy's appreciation of women is locked in at some, you know, arrested state. So he's still got a crush on the high school cheerleader, which, you know, he confesses that to her, but it's creepy. You know, it's like that whole thing about she doesn't remember me, he doesn't remember me. It kind of sours in a sense. Like Peggy's having a more pure experience, whereas Corky's experience, there's some stalkery, weird obsessive vibes that we start to see come out. What did you think of that? Like that card trick scene, Ronald, where he basically kind of loses it on her and she kind of sticks around, but that felt so much like abusive behavior, that just like what she gets from Duke. We find out later she's in an abusive marriage, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Duke is.
Do you think he actually got the right card in that scene?
I don't know.
I don't think we saw her card though. I think it was the three of clubs.
No.
Oh, really? I don't remember seeing her card.
I think it was the three of clubs.
I thought,
but I think in the context, of the book, she was relieved.
So did I. Yeah.
She was relieved that he got it because she didn't want him to flip out like that. But I think in the movie, you see that it was something he did that trick that way on purpose. You know.
Okay.
He like would make it, but he would hopefully do a less crazy version of it. But the idea is you do it once and you don't get it, then the person really leans in and then you get it and then you feel closer to them.
Right.
So, but I still think like that moment was like, man, why is she even continuing to talk to this guy? Like at that moment on, it was hard for you to accept any of his sort of romantic behavior and I think in 70s and 80s movies, male protagonists a lot of times have that quality where you go, did they know they were depicting like a weird misogynistic character? Or did they think this was just like a man? You know, I felt that way in Thief. It's just like, is this just an 80s man? Or is this like a deliberate portrayal of a misogynistic jerk?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, having not seen it before, like this was always something that I felt like was a movie that, you know, I see it on lists every once in a while. And I remember reading an article forever ago about Gene Wilder, was supposed to be in this role. And that always like stuck with me in terms of like wanting to see it. But having now seen it, like, I thought the movie was really good. Like it definitely, you know, I don't know, like it's definitely a movie of its time and a lot of the craft and the way it was made. And it's not like a cut at all in the movie, but I think in a lot of ways, like for some of the story points, it actually helps it. There's a couple scenes I took notes on that kind of stood out to me. Actually was in the scene where they're having sex and like there's like this sweeping romantic score, like the very stereotypical score, and like every shot where it would like flash out to Fat sitting on the chair, you'd hear like that like discordant like harmonica chiming in, like that kind of stuff like really kind of strikes a chord to kind of like set a tone. And I thought that scene really stood out. I really like the scene where she comes out to tell him that Duke is back and is watching them, and like it's kind of a sweet moment when he asks if he has the telescope, and then just basically tells her all those sweet things about like how he's always loved her. Like I felt like that whole line of dialogue, that writing there was really great. And then the scene between Ben and Corky when he like challenges him to sit 5 minutes without fats, that is like a fucking masterclass.
Yeah.
Like that scene is amazing. And yeah, I think whoever said Burgess Meredith is just great in this movie, you know, in the little screen time that he has. But that scene specifically, like when he breaks out that cigar, and oh my God, that scene was great. But yeah, I mean, just great performances. I mean, I like the kind of the way it kind of plays around with with DID and like, you know, what's going on with this character, both Fats and Corky, you know, who's playing who. And as the movie goes along, you know, kind of blurs it a little bit more, and you wonder at moments you wonder, is the doll doing anything on its own? But then, you know, you kind of have this reveal that in most cases, you know, you're seeing that Corky is involved. And yeah, I don't know. I had this sense watching it. I don't know how to describe it. I don't know if you experienced this, Ronald, but like I watched it on Freevee, so it's available on Freevee if anybody out there wanting to listen, which is what Amazon kind of rebranded IMDb as, and you can watch it as a channel on Prime TV if you have that. So it's available for streaming there as a free stream. But it looked really good, like for being a movie that
great.
whatever that transfer was for a movie of its age. And, you know, even thinking, you know, seeing a Hopkins performance, whatever it was, 13 or 14 years before Lecter comes around, you know, it's a nice little precursor to what that character and what that performance looked like in Silence of the Lambs. But yeah, I really enjoyed the movie. I thought it was really good, and just really well-rounded performances from everybody on the screen, really.
Cool. Yeah, and I will stress how faithful it was to the book. It's really interesting how much. Well, I mean, when you realize it's a short novel written by a screenwriter, and the screenwriter also does the movie,
right?
It's
right.
like it's no great mystery that it would be faithful. But I did start watching the movie. I finished the book and then started watching the movie, and I was like, instantly, I felt like, oh yeah, William Goldman didn't just get to adapt his book. He probably wrote the book knowing how it might work as a movie, and also knew how to put all the stuff you needed from the book into the movie. So if there was a flashback in the book that told us something, in the movie there's a line of dialogue somewhere in there. There were still some things that didn't have the full setup that you might have expected, but I think some of that was just some of that worked in the end.
Yeah.
For the movie and for the way it was put together, that it's not all completely spelled out. Like you get the idea of who the postman is, his agent. You get the idea that his Rolls
because he
Royce,
delivers.
Right, but I love that, and I also love that they call him Gan Green because he's old, and you know. But like, his name is Ben Green, and then earlier we have that moment where he's getting out of his car and he says, "Nobody touches a Rolls but a Rolls man," and then later the Rolls Royce becomes important. So it's like there's all this really expert. Like you could imagine William Goldman giving a lecture on like thriller structure and talking about how the reveals in this movie work. Because when we get to that last moment where whatever, I forget exactly how he says it. But Fats is saying to Corky as they're bleeding out, as they're both dying, "Us was you. Us was always you, kiddo," or whatever he says, you know, or schmucko, he says to him. So it's like it does answer that question that it, you know, it's. But there are a couple of moments where that doll's eyes move a little bit, or where it shifts slightly, where no one's near it, and I think those moments are so expertly inserted into the movie that they're really just there to make you feel like maybe you're losing your mind a little bit while you're watching it. Because it seems like it's very clearly set up that Corky is behind the killings. I don't know. And then I think all the business with disposing of a body, it feels very Hitchcockian when a movie spends time on like the nitty gritty aftermath of like, okay, there's not just been a murder, but now you've got to get rid of a body. Oh, and guess what? The guy's not dead, and he's more of a fighter than you might have thought. All that stuff is really fun. But Steve, yeah, I also wanted to call out that moment. Can you let Fats sit still for 5 minutes? Yeah. Can you just not can you not be the puppet for 5 minutes? And Anthony Hopkins sitting there, fantastic for both of them. I love the way he's drawing it out and the way he slowly checks the time, and yeah, he takes out that big cigar and starts smoking it. And Anthony Hopkins, yeah, is doing a fantastic. You said masterclass, but like it's tough for him, but you don't realize maybe until that moment that even he realizes like he says like I don't think I can make it. He's like halfway.
Yeah, barely halfway. He's like, yeah, I'm not gonna make it.
Yeah. And then
he just admits to it. Yeah. And then just and in that time, like, you know, the scene kind of playing out in real time, and you're watching it as Ben's watching his watch every time Corky asks for the time. And he's like, you know, a couple minutes have gone by, it's been 30 seconds. Yeah. You know, it's just like this perception of like what his ability is to separate from this doll. It's just like, it's just that's kind of where the whole thing just blows up, and you just realize that, you know, what Ben sees and what we've been watching really is something that Corky accepts, and then from there it just kind of splits off, and that's where all the chaos ensues, to quote my friend Ronald James.
So as for a scene that's not in this movie, though, I believe I said last time one of my all-time scare scenes I think is in this movie. And I was watching the movie and I was like, it's not in this movie. And here's a moment. Now I'm throwing it out to you. I'm throwing it out to the world. What movie is it? And I feel like it has to be an old movie because I've known this scene most of my adult life, where someone goes to look under the door and the eyeball is right there. Like, I thought it was the dummy at some point in this movie that someone looks under the door to see what's going on, and the eye is just right there. But now I'm like, well, what movie is that in where someone is like, you can imagine the tension of like looking, you're about to look, and then you get down there, and then it's like, it's just staring right back at you. It's not, you know, it's like, it's not what you expect. And that moment freaked me out. But now I'm wondering what movie it's from. Now I'm also wondering, like, did I somehow combine the moment where she's talking and seeing the movement under the door with some other, you know, like, did I conflate things? But I think it's a moment that I'm just, I put in this movie, and it's not in this movie. So now I throw it out to the world. And I tried to look it up online, and it was hard to find because he put in like scary scene where someone looks under door. You know, it's like,
it's a very unique description.
You'll get a few hits, but sometimes when all the hits are like from the last 10 years, you're like, nah, I know this is not the thing I've been thinking about since, you know, at least the 90s. So anyway,
yeah,
I will investigate. But I'm glad you guys liked it. I really did feel like this was a fun movie to watch. And I know we've said it already so many times, but like that performance of Burgess Meredith, it's that perfect kind of character in a movie like this. It's like he's not one of the leads. But every scene he's in, he just brings it to life, and he becomes so important in that moment where he's the one person maybe who can say to Corky, you need to check yourself, you know? There's no one else in his life really who knows him well enough to tell him that.
Yeah, that scene's great. Again, that's on Freebie. If you haven't watched it and you want to check it out or want to rewatch it, it's a good time of the year to do that. And if you've ever, I don't know, like I was looking through trying to find where to watch it, and I forgot that. Well, I remembered hearing it was recent that IMDb TV got renamed to Freebie, which is all under like, you know, Amazon. But it's a free channel if you have Prime TV, so you check that out. There's a lot of stuff on there. I was surprised to see for free. Cool. Yeah. So getting into the first of our main two reviews, I mentioned earlier that Bros, the new Nicholas Stoller comedy produced by Judd Apatow, co-written by Stoller and Billy Eichner, who stars in the movie also. It's a rom-com. Came out in theaters less than 2 weeks ago. Well, 2-ish weeks ago, a little over by the time this comes out. And it's one of those movies with all the buzz in the world and great reactions from festival screenings and press screenings, and an upper 90s percentile on, I think, both audience and press on Rotten Tomatoes. Just grossly underperformed. You know, this movie, I don't even think it made $5 million in its opening weekend, and dropped even more the following weekend. And now it's available on VOD, digital platforms, because of the Universal deal that they have, where, you know, basically they have a threshold, and I want to say it's if it makes over 50 million, they have you know, the opportunity to kind of keep it in. Well, I can't remember what the details are now that I say it all. Basically, if something underperforms, they have a window where they can release this thing digitally in 17 days. and that's what happened to Bros. So it comes out this week digitally, and I don't think did any of us, you didn't see it in theaters, did you, John?
No, I did not.
Yeah.
I coming up on the weekend when it was coming out, I wanted to,
Right.
and I had it earmarked as like, oh, because I had the week before managed to see a few movies in theaters, but
Right.
I was like, oh, Bros is one of those 2 or 3 movies that I want to see for our next episode, and then I wasn't able to see any movies that week because of a bunch of stuff that came up. So it was a bad coincidence on my end that I didn't go see it in the theaters.
Right.
But I mean, I had both because I was trying to see movies for this show and because this movie seemed like one of those that you want to support if you can.
Right.
So I feel a little bad that I was one of many people who probably waited a week too late or something to check this movie out. I'm sad that it underperformed. And I'm sad that seems to say something that I'm not sure it really says. I think there might be a lot of factors working against this movie having a huge box office bow. But
Right.
I think it's a little unfortunate that it, whatever. I hope the market doesn't. I hope the studios don't learn the wrong lesson from the performance of this movie in theaters, because it doesn't seem like a fair test for what the movie's trying to do, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to clarify real quick, I just looked this up, this deal. So Universal's deal basically says that they have the ability to put their movies on premium VOD platforms in as little as 17 days. So that's the minimum. But movies that gross at least $50 million when it's opening weekend are required to play exclusively in theaters for 31 days.
Oh, cool.
So that's the window. So, movies like Jurassic World, the last one, the Dominion, was a huge hit, but even still, just over a month later, they threw it on VOD and it's, still killing and made $1 billion worldwide still. But that little thing that they have with this sub 50, they can exercise this right to put these things on digital platforms, which they do a lot. I mean, they pretty much, most of their releases, even ones that they have like distribution deals, movies that they maybe not have produced themselves, but they've even come out in that 17 to 31 day window. But yeah, it's a really interesting deal, and especially like John was saying, like you really kind of was, at least I know we talked about it, we're rooting for this movie to really do well, just based off of the word of mouth and people that I know that had seen it. But yeah, just completely bombed. What did you think of the movie, Ronald? I mean, you watched the VOD, right? You didn't see it in theaters.
Yeah,
right?
I watched the VOD. I think one of the issues that I think that there's a saying that I hear a lot from especially people our age is that the internet isn't real. And now that's not true. But what it does mean on some level is that sometimes the enthusiasm or the anger, the extremes, sometimes don't represent the views of the general public, right? And sometimes it can become this kind of sounding board for just people that think like you. And that doesn't mean I'm not talking about people that are in the LGBTQ plus community. I just mean like-minded humor, like-minded ideas about things. And I think that this movie had this buzz that was just among critics, that was just among an exclusive group of people. Now, I think one of the problems is that it wasn't marketed particularly well. That's one thing. But then also there's a elephant in the room. What if something's trying to break barriers that where the barriers have been broken down already? Or what if you are watching a middle of the road movie and that's okay? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I was kind of saying. Like, sometimes we'll talk about movies that have like an all black cast, all Hispanic or Latinx. And we're just like, it was okay. And I think you should be allowed, marginalized groups should be allowed to have mediocre movies too.
Oh, no, because I was, Ronald, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was thinking like, this is middle of the road. This is mid.
Yeah, it's middle of the road.
Or at least, or this is boilerplate. It's not, but that it's like, why aren't there 50 middle of the road gay romantic comedies. Like
Man,
why doesn't that exist? And what you just said about
man.
whenever we want to kind of appreciate a movie because of breaking barriers. No, I love that you said it that way, because I had the exact same thought of like,
Yeah.
this should be more common. That doesn't mean this movie, and I do think this movie maybe tried, what you said is great, that it tried to break down barriers that maybe had already been broken down, but it's a mainstream middle of the road idea that it hasn't
Yeah.
been that accessible, or it hasn't been that middle of the road before. This movie
Yes.
does map onto like the rom-com template in a way that is very accessible, or should be
Mhm.
accessible. But the fact that it's not the greatest movie in the world shouldn't dirty the argument.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. That's the thing. Like, I enjoyed it, but I also have like, I think what's happening, especially with like all the streaming services, we can watch a 8 to 10 episode comedy about a gay protagonist who, and the cast is amazing, and I mean, this is happening right now and has been happening for the last couple of years. We've talked about a couple of shows.
I kept thinking about the other two.
Oh, the other two, yes. I mean, there's a couple.
Oh, I mean, he's bisexual on that show, but it's the same idea of like the sex life is depicted in a way that's very frank and that you just haven't seen depicted, and that's a very funny, edgy comedy, which this movie is not. I mean, again, we're not trying to take away points for not being edgy, but I think we're on the same page that it's like it's going for some kind of familiar rom-com quality.
Yeah, it's going in that lane that like 75% of the rom-coms are.
Yes,
like it's going in that kind of like, this was good. I had a few really good laughs, and it's great and it's sweet. Like,
it's very
good performances. Sweet. Yeah, it's just like it's what, and I think the argument to be made, and he's kind of come under some criticism for how he's responded maybe to the underperformance, but like, just this idea that like, these just go more than, I don't know. I would say it's more than okay personally. Like, I think it's better than okay. But like, it's not like an amazing rom-com, but I mean, that's the reality though. Like, you could probably name 10 to 15 amazing rom-coms for the past like 30, 40 years, that are legitimately in that echelon, tier. But like the most of the rom-coms that exist, all the 90s and early aughts, like, they were just okay, but they'd make $100 million because people went and saw rom-coms.
It was the star power. It was that's what Matthew people McConaughey saw. And Kate Hudson, or it was whatever.
Or like, Julia Roberts or Hugh Grant. Like all these people, like that's what they went to see. So there's like this shift of like, it's not so much the genre only that they were going to see, it's the stars. So here's a rom-com that really doesn't have any stars. I mean, Billy Eichner is the closest to one maybe in the movie, but like, he's definitely not a star. Like, he has no kind of box office history or kind of, pedigree or anything like that. So like, I think that's kind of what you're definitely right, Ronald. And that's something I was thinking about too, is that like, the existed, like what you see and feel on like film Twitter, and especially the bubbles that we create for ourselves when we follow X, Y, and Z on film Twitter, we kind of see like that this is going to be some massive thing. And it's like, when it hits just the average moviegoer, especially when you talk about comedies, and this is the saddest part, is that it seems like comedies don't really have a place theatrically anymore. And and you'll see that because this will come out on VOD, and I think this movie will do much better on VOD.
Will do so well.
And most of the better comedies / rom-coms that we've talked about on this show in the last, not only because of the pandemic, obviously, because past few years have been greatly affected by that, but even in the years prior, we saw some great comedies in theaters that nobody went to see, like massive underperforming with movie stars, with Seth Rogen, with Charlize Theron. That was one of my favorite movies of that year, and nobody saw it. Yes. And I think that it's just like a question of like, when people pay for all these streaming services at home, or they have the ability a week and a half later, 2 weeks later to watch it at home, are they going to pay to go to a theater to see a comedy? Is that where they want that theatrical experience with a comedy? I don't know that it is anymore.
Yeah. I said something to Aaron that has been kind of sitting in my head pretty much since I saw it. This movie may age really well. And PVOD and stuff like that is where this thing's going to live. And then when it goes to like, when it hits Netflix, when it hits Hulu, I think it's going to do really well. And it being kind of, it is the most accessible of the. Here's the problem. Here's another problem too. I don't know if everybody, even people in the same demo, I don't necessarily know if people always want a white dude to present this to them. Even white people. I don't know if this is the story necessarily that they want to get from this person. It has to be extraordinary. You get what I'm saying? I'm saying if you're going to
they present that in the movie, and Billy Eichner is clearly making that joke about himself.
It's an inside joke inside of a joke.
Right, and the way they try to balance that in the movie, I think, is by that committee he's on for the museum, where you have so much different representation of.
I love that.
Different,
I love
those
folks. Scenes.
And I think that in those moments is when they manage to make that sort of quote unquote agenda funny of like, let's represent. This movie's trying to be representational in a way. I felt like there were moments where the movie got kind of preachy, or in both the romantic storyline and in the kind of messagey plot line. There were moments where it got kind of preachy or kind of cheesy to me. But I think that's part of that sort of reaching out accessibility, that it spells out what it's trying to do very clearly. But I think you're right, Ronald. The movie does refer to himself as a cis white gay guy. And as a cis white straight guy who sometimes feels the need to say that, like before I open my mouth, I know no one wants to hear from a middle-aged white cis het suburban dad. I know that nobody wants to hear from this guy, but I have to say something right now. But I mean, I feel like this movie does, like, he says that a few times, so they're definitely thinking about that. But maybe in a sense, like what you're saying is like it might age well, but it also has a little bit of a timestamp on it, because even though this movie's breaking some molds, the default setting is still put a white guy at the center of it, or a white person. In a sense, if this was a romantic comedy, this might be he's really playing what might be the Meg Ryan role or the Julia Roberts role. He's the sort of main character romantic who needs to meet somebody. Anyway, what did you guys think of I forget the actor who played him, but the romantic lead, the other guy? I mean, Billy Eichner is a comic persona that we know. I happen to find him very funny in small doses and very likable when he goes on like a podcast or something. Like, I think he's smart and funny, and his references move really fast. And some of that comes over to this movie. It's got when it doesn't feel kind of stilted, his performance, he's not quite a leading man, but he does a great job overall, I think, with his performance in this movie. There's just a few moments where it feels a little like, oh, this is scripted, and he's playing a character more than he's just doing himself. And I think he's at his best when he's kind of being himself. But I thought he was really funny on Parks and Rec. And I think Billy on the Street, if you watch a segment
so good, man,
every so often, it's so funny. And again, that's a comic persona that he's invented for himself. So I feel like maybe that's the other elephant in the room is he's a strong comic persona if you're trying to hang your mainstream romantic comedy on it. Like, he's a bit to take. Some people might have thought, I don't know if I could take 2 hours of Billy Eichner before going into this movie. So it's a little bit, it's not quite Pee Wee Herman, but it's it's close to it, of just like, this is an extreme persona. But I thought it was cool seeing how he balanced off of a more traditional kind of romantic comedy character, which was the boyfriend. What did you guys think of the other fella?
Oh, I liked him a lot. I mean, I actually remembered him from Brothers and Sisters.
Okay.
But apparently he hasn't. I mean, he does a ton of Hallmark movies. When I showed my mom the trailer, she recognized him from like Hallmark, which they make jokes about. Which they make jokes about in Bros, which I thought was great, actually. But yeah, he's in a bunch of the Hallmark movies. But I really liked him, Luke McFarlane.
Luke McFarlane, that's the actor.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that what you just basically said, John, in the sense that Aaron and Bobby, like, that they could be that much apart in terms of their personalities and just their interests in life, and physically, just everything about them was just like the most extreme opposites attract scenario that you would see in any kind of rom-com. But in general, like, I thought his performance was really good, and their chemistry together was really good, especially kind of when you get into the like the part of the film where you have the conflict. I feel like towards the end of the film, if you look at that standard rom-com equation, where you get to the or won't they part of the story, like, I felt like that part of the story for them is really like where their chemistry and probably and their performances in general, respectively, and together, I thought really kind of gelled the best.
Yeah,
because that's where you really got to see the other side of the characters that they were both playing, kind of against what you saw for the first, half, 2/3 of the movie. But yeah, I thought they were really good together, especially Luke McFarlane, who most people I think don't know.
Well, I was just going to interject there, Steve. Like that's a moment that a lot of romantic comedies really fumble. Is the why is there a problem?
Yeah.
But I wasn't even thinking about what you just said. This movie, it felt so organic that what they might want from a relationship would just be different.
Yeah.
And I honestly, I didn't even think about how well they handled that transition. That it went from they were maybe because this movie gives you this. And again, this might be some of the sort of. Dating culture that they're trying to depict and how it's kind of different, but there's a lot of jokes made about short-term relationships and how it's not expected to last very long. And it is a little bit like they went from, well, we're not really dating, are we? To kind of dating without saying they are, to then like their personality clash kind of pushing them away. So I felt like you're right. I'm glad you mentioned that because that is a real plus of the way this movie works. That part didn't feel stilted at all. It really felt like, oh, these are two people who seem to be noticing that they're not gelling. And not this whole thing of like, there's not like a misunderstanding or some super plot contrivance that they have to weed their way through to figure out. There's not like a lie that one of them's been telling that blew up at a dinner party. So often in rom-coms, it's much more contrived than what they were facing, which was just, are we the right fit for each other?
Right. Right.
What did you think of the romance and the ingenue of this movie, the Luke McFarlane performance?
As a guy that has a really close friend that's a mask presenting gay man, it's a heavy duty thing that's kind of subtly played in this movie that that's the kind of unique thing I saw in this movie. The idea that like there's spectrums to gayness as with men, and without going into too much detail, sometimes when somebody's like kind of more masculine presenting, the conflict to not want to be like stereotypes of gay people can be very hard. You don't want to lean into that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they don't feel like that's a part of their identity because it's a spectrum. When people say that, sexuality is a spectrum, it truly is, And so seeing this conflict that this man had in his head where he's like, I'm gay, but like whatever this idea is, I don't know if I'm falling into it. I don't know if I want to be it. And seeing him physically get kind of like, I love how this feels, but I don't want to do this necessarily because of all the things that are stuck in my head. So that conflict was cool. I thought he was really, really good at that. And you're right, him and Billy's chemistry on screen was just unreal. Like that's the one part, like I said, that'll leave this thing kind of timeless in that way. Like I think if you go back to see this in a couple years, sure, some of the jokes might be a little, where they stand up, but I really do like the chemistry between them, and that stuff holds up. And I think that, like I said, when this gets to more eyes, this may be some people's first gay rom-com or gay story that they've ever taken in. And sure, it gets a little, implied graphic stuff is happening, but it really is just a story of two people that are very different and finding love in a hopeless place, in the words of Rihanna. So I think it's really cool, man. And that's the cool part about mediocre movies. It can just sit somewhere. This is what's gonna happen, man. I promise. It's gonna be like one of those Rotten Tomato episodes where they're like, maybe we need the second thing, like maybe this should have got more attention. Bro should have got more attention. And in like 2 years, there's going to be a think piece about how good this movie is and how we should have supported it, how we're all assholes, and we should be thanking Billy for making a movie this kind of middle of the road, but fun and accessible. And so it's also weird though. Like it's very preachy. It, like you said, like the preachy part about it is what makes it so like I don't know if I would sell somebody on this. Because it's so like, it kind of steers kind of along the lines of paragraphs that I've read on Twitter. You know what I mean? Like,
right, and that's where you
He's
think
trying
the
to
movie
educate an audience or something.
yes,
and maybe, and
yes.
again, there's certainly people that need
Edutainment.
this education. We shouldn't assume that they aren't, but
Oh,
it
sure.
does feel
Yes,
like
yes.
that is a way in which it does mark itself as feeling like, oh, this is for that mass audience, not for the audience that it's already even slightly in the know about some of these issues. And I'm not saying that I'm in the know about all these issues, but there wasn't a lot about this movie that shocked or impressed or was like new information to me. I still felt like seeing it presented in this likable form was a fun watch. And again, if you like romantic comedies, you know it comes down to the charm of the people in it. And this movie has a real sweet romance. And there's some moments that really are just sweet. It kind of reminded me of in terms of the way that it's presenting a gay romance, is the romance of Dan Levy's character on Schitt's Creek, which this movie makes a few jokes about. But in the end, this movie basically pulls a Schitt's Creek where there's a certain amount of corn that you're having to accept. And it's like, I'm like, oh, I guess, again, I'm like, I didn't know it. I didn't know that gay people were corny too, but I love it. They've got to be.
Yeah, but that's the thing.
We all get to get corny. We all get to get corny.
Those rom-coms that are just like, just, I personally say this is better than mediocre. Like I think it's a very good rom-com personally.
Yeah,
I think it's above average, but I don't think it's like some amazing thing, right? But
right.
I will say
all
that
I was
like
saying.
the real get that you can take from this is kind of what we've been saying about, the sweet moments and like kind of what makes it work is this chemistry. Ultimately, it's just like, if you really want these two people to be together, and like, I don't think you can watch this movie and not want them to be together.
Right.
Personally.
Right.
Like by the end of the movie, you're just really hoping, like you are in every rom-com, even though the ending is kind of sometimes predetermined and you know where it's going to go. But there's like a shred of doubt that maybe they're not. And you're just like, man, I really hope they do. And that's really, I experienced that watching it. And I feel like it's just a really sweet love story, that you want to see them, you want to see it work out for both of them because they both need this. And and they're better for it. And I really just think that that's what it's successful at. And I also just found it to be really funny. And I really like the song he sings for him at the museum opening to the Garth Brooks tune. I thought that was very funny. And if you had any interest, I will say I feel like the title for the movie is very bad.
Yeah,
I feel like I don't know what the alternative is. But I feel like there's got to be a better and I think that may have been what kind of hurt this movie a little bit beyond the marketing of it, like Ronald was saying. But I feel like Bros is not a good title for a movie.
Well, they're going for that Apatovian simplicity with that title, but it feels like they're reaching for an audience that this movie was not going to hit. And so I even had that thought today, Steve. Like when I was like looking up for facts about the movie before this conversation, I
was there an alt?
I was like, oh yeah, Bros is the name. I had to like type it in and be like, that's the name of that. That's right. It is an odd thing. I did want to throw back. There's one thing that happens in one of those museum committee meetings that to me was a very funny moment. The only thing I really wrote down is when he's apologizing to the committee after a scene that he causes in the museum, and then the one person says, "This live apology has 40K views right now," and then he looks at her and he says, "Everything should be posted. Thank you for teaching me that."
That was really good, man.
Well, he starts to get mad. He's like, "What are you?" And then she's like, "Yeah." And then he's like, "Everything should be posted. Thank you for teaching me that." And it just that was such a fun
it was
moment.
great.
But no,
so
I think we're all sort of saying, we've been saying mediocre, but I kind of agree with Steve. Like to me, what's above mediocre is those great romantic comedies that you were talking about, Steve. Those just super great ones. So this is watchable. This is fun. I watched this movie alone to prep for this show, but I did find myself thinking, oh, I should have, Nikki. This is the kind of movie that is fun to watch with a group, and you can laugh and enjoy it. And again, we've seen this movie before, but in some ways that's the point. And I think that's the thing. It's like you shouldn't treat it like homework or taking vitamins or anything like that. It's just a good movie. And I do agree with you, Steve, that I think this movie will find an audience on streaming that, maybe it will redeem the story of this movie, but I do think the sadder, larger story is those movies that are, we've heard about those mid-budget movies of all sorts that are disappearing from like studios' schedules because they can't make money off of them. And if now mid-budget or big-budget studio comedies are just not viable, it's a bummer when you think about how many great movies from the past were in that slot of like a silly movie that they just put way too much money into it, and it made it some kind of great thing. So I don't know. We'll have to see. what happens with that. Oh, by the way, we didn't get a selection for required viewing next time.
Oh yeah.
Oh, is this is mine? So are we?
Yes.
Would you like to see something on the serious side or more on the light side? I guess that's because I have two, and it's going to be based on how you two feel about that. Because they're both Halloween related movies.
I think because it's the month that we're in, I guess I would say, this is your chance to make me watch a Saw movie. So I'd be surprised if you didn't take it. But B, I think whatever you think feels like the more the feels like the more Halloween selection. Whatever feels more on point for the month to you.
All right.
Is what I would say. What do you think, Steve?
So
I agree.
All right.
Steve agrees.
So this selection I haven't seen probably since the 90s. So I don't have any recollection of anything but one scene that shook me to my core when I was a kid. So I was a big fan of like Nightmare Theater and all that stuff. And I remember a scene that I will never forget. And every time I go to a funeral, I think about it. A man's in a casket, the funeral's happening. They zoom into the casket and the man is crying because his body is in stasis. Because nobody knows he's alive. The Serpent and the Rainbow, Wes Craven's, I think it's 1988 film. I haven't seen it in a really long time. I seldom hear people. Yeah. I really don't hear people talk about it. The Serpent and the Rainbow, I want to give it some love. Because I also don't remember the plot of it at all. But yeah, Wes Craven. I don't. Besides that one,
it's like a voodoo, whatever modern, real world's quote unquote. I think it's supposed to be based on a true story, but the movie's not attempting to be.
Yeah, they like fictionalized it and all that stuff. Yeah, that movie. But I think about it a lot, man. Like I like fucking scared me so bad. Like every time I'm at a funeral, I'm like, is that person really dead? Are they crying in there? This is weird because it's.
When I was a kid, that scared me more than anything. The idea of being buried alive, even though everyone told me it really can't happen the way we do it now. And I was like, you don't know that.
You don't know. That sounds like a lie.
I thought I could survive being embalmed, embalmed
right.
and, all that stuff. But so that's great. That's fun. I'm okay. Good. I haven't seen that since college myself. So
yeah.
Okay. Cool. So
I haven't seen it since the 90s.
Yeah, like Nightmare Theater.
It was 88, so I was probably early. Yeah, I probably saw it on like USA or something. Yeah.
Right. Wow. Okay. Cool.
So if you want to watch it before the episode, that's on Peacock.
Oh, it's on Peacock.
If you want to stream it, yeah.
Cool. So I picked a very streaming friendly movie.
Yes, and also on Peacock. Yeah, transition. Is Halloween Ends. And how do we feel about Halloween Ends?
I think, I liked a lot of it. I think that the last act gets super messy, and I think it's got some cool moments and it's got some stuff that didn't work for me that's in the last act. But I think the attempt to do something a little different and track this different character and show a different side of things, I was on board with, like, how much this was this trilogy gave us the first one, which was the sort of return to a Halloween movie, make a Michael Myers movie, The second one had a little bit more of a take creeping into it. And I think most people would agree the part of Halloween Kills that really doesn't work, even people like myself who like some of the Michael kills in that, it's the commentary, it's the mob stuff, it's the movie's idea, mob, it's the take that didn't really click, And then I think Ends is similar with people. I see it being very divisive. I mean, I see it out there. I see people's reactions to it. But I see enough people that enjoyed it enough, like I did, that I can tell that it's not like this universally reviled thing they tried to do. But they kind of pulled what Halloween did with Season of the Witch in a different way, which is sidestepping the idea of what a Halloween movie is. This is not a very good Michael Myers movie. If you wanted this to be the final big hurrah for Michael Myers, this is not the movie that you wanted. But if you wanted to see kind of just a well-made movie with a creepy story that's got Michael Myers in it and is kind of trying to do something a little different, I think this movie works until it starts to get too confused, like, as to what its intention is. Like, it seems to be setting up this perfect idea of like, oh, now Michael Myers has like an apprentice with him or something, okay, but it doesn't do that. It doesn't stick. Even once it sets that idea up, it doesn't do anything with that idea. It just kind of moves past it. And then I think it's got some stuff that maybe if we were talking super spoilery, I would go down my real list of complaints are very specific moments. But I was enjoying the fact that I had no idea what the fuck I was watching for like the first 45 minutes or so. And then I think it started to kind of reveal what it was, it lost me in different ways. But yeah, that's my take on it. I feel like this is, I don't know. I feel like this is right alongside Kills for me as like a movie that's got some cool stuff in it and some stuff that just I don't think works. It's accidentally making the 2018 Halloween, which I was sort of lukewarm on. It's making it seem like, oh, it's the obvious overall success of this trilogy. And I don't mean that as a huge knock on it. Like I like what they were able to do. I think this is cool. I don't want someone to be given quite this arrangement again with a Halloween movie, like a trilogy, whatever the plan was. I don't feel like there was that. It's a little bit like looking at the Star Wars sequel trilogy, where you look back at the end and you go, "This doesn't feel like a trilogy. This doesn't feel like a plan." Right. But I don't know. Like I said, I think it had some really cool moments and some stuff that I would really argue for the effectiveness of. So I can't hate on this movie, but I can say it's a very weird kind of mishmash. Somebody else talk.
Steve, I want you to go next.
Yeah, I in almost every point I would have to disagree. I feel like this movie is a huge missed opportunity. I feel like this whole trilogy, now that I've seen how it ends, is a huge missed opportunity. I can respect like having a take and trying to do something different with the trilogy. But yeah, I guess the Star Wars thing you just mentioned does feel pretty appropriate, because I feel like kind of going for that in the third of the three movies is probably not. I wouldn't say that's a good approach, especially when the take of the the mob mentality in the second one, and you can kind of see the remnants of that on the town in this one, which I think that's kind of works and that's kind of interesting. But where this movie goes in terms of like him having a helper of sorts, I think it's kind of laughable at times in the movie, and I think the script really fails everybody on board here. To think that this is like Jamie Lee's last Halloween movie is very depressing to me, with the exception of like the last scene that she has with Michael in the house. I would say I actually really liked all of that.
I did too. That was like one of my favorite things was how she just utterly like she's really going for it in this fight, and as far as that ends in the title, they do try to earn it, with what happens.
And that does like that right there works. And there's some other scenes in the movie that I really like. I love the cold open. I thought that was great, and I was like, holy shit, this movie is going to be awesome. Like, what is this doing? And then when you kind of get into it, and I don't want to. I'm trying to be a little vague in what I'm saying here, but some of the scenes and some of the dialogue when this tag team is spending time together in terms of dynamics. In terms of what Michael Myers is doing in certain scenes just seems very out of sync with what Michael Myers has been doing in any timeline of Halloween that you want to pick, whether it's this one, that this is branching off of from the first, or the, Halloween 1-2 H2O resurrection timeline, or if you want to go, 4, 5, 6, whatever one you pick. I just feel like some of the stuff with Michael Myers in this movie just doesn't work for me. I really wanted to like it. I was trying to, make excuses as I was watching it and be like, yeah, I'm into this. I'm into this. I kind of feel the same way about Kills, like where I would definitely watch it again just because I feel like it's still kind of entertaining. It's still kind of a fun, quote unquote, watch, but in almost in like a negative way though. And I felt the same way about Kills. Like, it's just like I'm looking at all the things I don't like about it, but just really wanting to see some cool kill scenes, to see a really good scene with Laurie and Michael towards the end of the film. And the character of Corey, who's like the newly introduced character in this movie, I actually think the actor who plays him really did a great job. Like, I actually think the performance is really good. It's just the story and the script is just I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of issues with the script, And some of his lines of dialogue, especially almost in every scene he's in with Laurie Strode, is just some of it's laughable to me. But I think and for all accounts and purposes, like I think in general, this is a pretty big failure to me. And I think, the box office being the lowest of the three, even with the day and date, Kills had the day and date in a worse time of the pandemic and did really, really well still. The critical reception is not great. The audience score is the lowest of the Halloween films. It just seems like something is missed, got missed. And I felt concerned going into the marketing for the movie, to the screening program for the movie, to the press being done for the movie. Like nobody beyond Jamie talking about this being her last Halloween movie is really all you got to see, which is really about her and less about the movie. And that's like a bad sign. And unfortunately, I feel like those concerns really kind of played out when I watched the movie. Yeah, definitely a big letdown for me. Ronald, what did you think?
I mean, I agree with both of you. I've mixed feelings. Like on one end, I do like they took a bunch of swings, crazy swings. I think here's another take. I think I would have felt different about this trilogy if these movies were spread out a little more. Like if I had a little time to breathe
time wise. Okay.
Time wise. Like if Halloween came out, it gave me 5 years to breathe, and the next one came out. And then even with the same plot, I think I'd feel a lot different about them. But the fact that they're coming at me rapid fire, you better come with some extreme heat if you're gonna follow up within, it's only been 4 years. These should have been incredible. Why are you rushing these things? You get what I'm saying? The exchange should have been, if you're releasing all these in 4 years, they should be incredible. Or you pace out the shit for 10 years, 7 years. Let's say 7 years, right? So that's my first thing. I feel about this trilogy the way that I felt about Man of Steel into any other depiction of Superman. Like Man of Steel was a pretty amazing movie that aged pretty well to me, right? But it seemed like after a point, he was like, Superman is a bitch. I don't know when that happened. I don't know when there was a decision made. He's just like, I don't like him. He's a piece of shit. I'm going to treat him like a piece of shit. Nobody's going to like him. He isn't going to be depicted in any good, like he isn't going to be a hero anymore. He's going to be exciting.
People are afraid of him.
Yeah, people are afraid.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? So like, it feels like I think that there was this remnants of a good idea for the first one. Kills, I was like, okay, this is crazy, but let's see what happens. And then it confirmed it in the third one. I think you hate this character. You don't like this character. You don't like it for the reasons that made it popular, right? So your new take is just uprooting the shit that people love about him, the shape, the daunting things, and then you made him a stooge. You made him a stooge that's fumbling on the ground as this guy's like jumping on top of him, shaking him up, and Michael Myers is doing nothing. I mean, he's doing nothing to him. He's like, he's like this stooge, and I hated that happened. I'm okay.
See, you're making me smile, because even though I thought that one part, that would be a part that I was like, does this not break the rules of a Halloween movie that anybody can get the drop on Michael?
Right.
Does that not break the rules? However, I like the fact that this movie depicted. I mean, I guess I would. This is one of those points I would argue on. I think it's cool that we got to see one of these movies where Michael is like a 65-year-old man who's been through some shit, and he can't move that good, and he's like a little bit out of practice. I'm fine with, we've got 13, 14 movies, whatever it's going to be. I'm fine if one of them is this different treatment where he's almost like an urban legend living in a tunnel. What I think is weird is what you said earlier, Steve, that this is not this is not Halloween Ends. Halloween Ends should be a Michael Myers, or at least the way that title makes you feel.
Yes.
This feels like it should be after that, The New Beginning, or like an offshoot or something. I think that I can see why people are disappointed with that aspect of it, but I do think that it's like we've gotten it before where it goes a different way. So even though I was like, can you do that? Are you allowed to have a character just like come up and knock Michael around? Like that didn't sit well with me, but I did enjoy that Michael, especially if we see him with his mask off, he's just been through it. Like there's just, he looks like a walking scar, you know? And so I'm fine with the idea that he's kind of lost a step, but I do think that all the stuff you guys are talking about that is the shakiest stuff is all those interactions that seem to indicate like, why is Michael treating this person differently than he's treated other people? That to me is an interesting question. It's made me think about who has he sort of let live, so to speak. The baby in the crib, Laurie's granddaughter, Lonnie in this series, and this guy. Like there are people who have been in front of Michael and Michael has decided not to kill them. Right. I think it's an interesting question. Why does he let somebody live? That to me, that's intriguing. I don't think the movie really does anything with the coolness of that. And what they present is what you guys are talking about, which is the absolute shakiest part of the movie, which is the sort of interplay between those two characters when I think there's a kill scene where it works well, I think, but the stuff that's like supposed to be describing like, it's too vague, and it's not clear whether we're supposed to believe there's some supernatural shit going on or whether it's all psychological. It's messy. And I'm kind of with you on the script, Steve, even though I enjoyed parts of it. I think it's weird that these guys wrote this thing that's so wobbly in terms of how it's structured, in terms of what the story is that it's telling. It's really weird.
It feels like it also maybe like I don't know the the history of the production, but like it also feels like the movie is very kind of broken apart at times. Like there's a lot of scenes in the middle of the movie. I'm trying to just talk.
I think I know what you mean. Where a scene goes to the next scene and you're not feeling a real like when is this happening? Is this the next day? Is this the same night? Yeah, no, exactly. I agree.
Specifically, like between like this newer character, like where he is in one scene and the next scene he's with someone else.
Yeah, makes no sense.
Like a house, and it's like, what was the transitional time there? Like, there's no sense of a time, until the card comes up saying it's Halloween. Like everything before that, you're just like, well, how much time was between these two scenes?
Right.
And
I agree with that.
It's just very, I don't know. It just felt very messy,
sloppy.
Yeah.
Can I make another complaint, man? No. Look, when you watch a movie in the 80s or the 70s, a bully was a bully. It was a person that was daunting, that was scary. I used to get bullied when I was a kid. And if these kids came up to me and said anything to me, I would have fought all of them. There's no way.
Knocked them down or thrown them off the bridge before they got
There's no fucking way that I let those kids talk to me crazy. That didn't exist in my life.
And why does he have why does he have a varsity jacket on? Like that's like that's like standard issue for bullies. I want to know why this guy. I'm not saying I understand bullies in a way that's positive, but I can imagine the psychology, the upbringing that produces the kid who's like the main bully, the kid who's like, yeah, well, fuck you or whatever. I can imagine like what's going on in the mind of that person. Like that's terrible, and that person needs help, and they probably have a bad upbringing. But I can picture that. I don't know how you end up being the guy standing like 2 feet behind that guy, going, "Yeah." I don't know. I don't know where these bullies find their henchmen. Being a soul bully, it's like, okay, that's an organism I get. And you're right. It's the most stereotypical depiction of like a group of kids, and they don't seem like he seems like he should be able to beat them. Like he's like older than them. He's like
he's scrappy. He's in shape. I'm like, what am I missing?
He can take out Michael Myers, but he can't take out.
That's the key right there.
These teenagers.
I'm just make them
until he gets mad. Spoilers.
Make them bullies, like those kids that they have in like 80s movies when they were like scary.
They're driving around in a convertible.
There's a comment I saw where someone was like, what does David Gordon Green have against marching band members? Because apparently like all of the like asshole teens in this trilogy, like there's at least one of them in the group who's like in the marching band. Like I think one or two of them in this group, the four, has like a marching band jacket on, and like they're talking about
what bully? Where would these people be bullies?
If you want to watch this is a watch at Peacock for me, unless you just want one last, for now, theatrical experience with Halloween. I feel like, I think I've said this on the podcast before. I know I've said it to a couple people this last week talking about this movie, but like, what kills me is that like, I liked the Halloween that came out in 2018. I didn't love it, But I did think that it had like the best ending. If they were going to have a movie to give Laurie Strode and 3 generations of her family a moment with Michael Myers, like what kills me is now seeing how this trilogy ended versus how that film ended.
Yeah.
And like that feels like the biggest missed opportunity to say that was our take. That was how we wanted to have Laurie go out. And I just remember feeling like how the movie was good, not great, but the ending was awesome.
Yeah.
And
it felt like the right kind of ending.
And just that like twist of them actually being prepared and having a plan and like being in cahoots of sorts, like with one another and downplaying it, like the Judy Greer character. I just thought that was great. And so seeing how this ends, even though I did like the moment with Laurie and Michael in the kitchen and everything, I thought that was all really good. But I could not get out of my mind the idea of like how I felt that 2018 film ended so perfectly.
Like they chipped away at the completeness of that ending.
Exactly.
The next
and regurgitated some of the points of it, like to the point of like Laurie being crazy. Like Carrie Bradshaw or something at this point.
It drove me crazy that she and her granddaughter had like the conflict. Like,
yes,
I found their conflict so annoying in this movie. Like when they were yelling at each other, and it's in the last act of the movie. I was like, aren't we past this? I mean, this whole idea that this is a trilogy that's about examining trauma and processing trauma. It's like, I get it that's where horror movies get their juice, is from some of this stuff. But when it's like so textual, it starts to seem kind of annoying to me, and like nails on a chalkboard.
Totally.
And not like powerful. It should be sublimated into the horror. And I was very annoyed that we were still processing the trauma of what Michael's done. As in contrast to what you said, Steve, I liked the implication that Haddonfield has been kind of fucked up in the last 4 years. I felt like that was a creepy idea that they did almost nothing with, but just the fact that there's, you know, like almost like he's infected the town, which might be a little silly, but just this idea that Haddonfield is kind of a rough place. I also will say this, just like in the second movie, any of the stuff in this movie that involved like a giant mob forming, I found that so cheesy. I thought that was so cheesy. Like a group of people silently walking out to follow somebody and watch them do something that they can't even see from where they're standing was just a like. Why are you standing here? Oh, for the shot. Because I don't know what's going on and we're not saying anything. I don't know. I thought that was really, really badly handled. But I loved what was happening that they were there to see. To me, that was one of the things the movie did well. Let's end on a note of there is no coming back from this. You know, I think that was like I like that felt like a Danny McBride move. I know he was one of the writers of this, but that's one of the moves that felt like him. It's like let's make this a real ending. But it's weird and it's a mixed bag and it's divisive. But kind of what you said, Steve. Even if you don't like this, if you love this series, this might be a movie you could watch 1 or 2 times just to for the entertainment value. But it is a little weird that this trilogy has gone the way it has, and the numbers are bad. Like like you said, and that
this won't even make $100 million.
Like it's hard to imagine a theatrical audience supporting this movie too much. But it's also like, I think that being able to watch it at home, like, absolutely killed any chance of box office performance. And it's a weird move, but it's like an act of like no confidence almost in the movie. As much as I appreciated being able to see it at home. So
there it is.
What do you think is the next move, Ronald? What do you think okay, a couple years down the road, you know, they're going to step in, someone's going to reboot it. I had a few thoughts of like what the likely path might be, but what do you think they're going to do? Like a prequel, a Loomis cable series about his other patients? Like how are they going to take this franchise forward? Is it just going to be somebody making a new movie that's also called Halloween that
that just ignores
everything up to this point?
At this point, I'd rather see a Freddy versus Jason 2. Like I'd rather that than
that's the take right there, is that leave Halloween. Let it sleep for a while. I mean, for a while.
Yeah.
You know, like Nightmare and Friday are begging for attention. And I think that they're both overdue for some really quality attention. And I have a feeling that Blumhouse has something going on with Nightmare on Elm Street. I don't know why.
Really?
I feel that Jason Blum has been tweeting some very vague things. Either Nightmare or Friday, he's got something that he's going to announce soon, I feel like, and it's going to be one of those two. But you know, it's like there's some speculation that I don't know what I think it was Nightmare that they were saying might be the one, but I kind of agree. I just feel like I love Michael Myers. I love Halloween. I love this franchise. I think this has kind of been a downturn for it, to be honest. And
which is weird.
It's very weird, especially because like I feel more people going back and saying how much they appreciate the Rob Zombie movies post this trilogy, which is not something I expected. And
well, isn't it similar to Star Wars fans talking about the prequels
for sure,
in light
for sure.
of the sequels? Though it's funny how
it's a great comparison. Yeah,
you can now
totally.
like pick the one you want, and also like Force Awakens ended on this high that felt like Star Wars is back, baby, and Halloween 2018 ended on this sort of a high too. It's like people, and you've been losing that feeling since, you know,
ever since diminishing returns.
The average fan has been losing that sense. So
just leave it. Let it sit there. Leave it alone. Leave it alone. There's plenty of other. They're already doing other horror reboots, and they got stuff in the works. But we need they need to do something with these slasher franchises, and Nightmare and Friday. They've been dormant for long enough, and they need some attention. So I would love to see those be the focus for a while, and see what they can do with those, because those are definitely worthy of it. So
Steve and Ronald, but Steve, you're such a genre guy. I'm curious what you think of this. Like, I was thinking about Friday 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street 2, I suppose. Going forward with them, what does it look like? Because like at this point, are you doing a sequel that tries to connect to the previous? Like, are you bringing back Robert Englund because that's what would work maybe, and you're trying to tie it to the old movies, but it's somehow a new movie? And with Friday the 13th, you've got like a reboot that was pretty successful. People liked it. That's like 12 years old now. What do you do? How do you take Jason Voorhees, for instance? Do you come up with a whole new movie that once again starts to retell that story? Do you try to connect to the old mythology? Do you just give us it's Camp Crystal Lake and a bunch of people are there and Jason shows up and you don't try to explain how it connects? I think I like the last option best, but what do you think? Like, what's the smart way? You think so?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think you need to start over regardless. I don't see them building off of the legacy Friday films or even the most recent remake, which I really liked the remake a lot.
Yeah.
And it was
a great
successful.
Jason. I love Derek Mears as
so good
character.
But that's a cool take. I feel like maybe it's just kind of more around Camp Crystal Lake, and then that's kind of that's the introduction. That's the launch of the franchise. Is just that slasher. Nightmare is a little different. I don't really know, because the remake that Platinum Dunes did for it, I thought was horrible.
Yeah.
And I feel like you could probably just forget that happened, and you could try to just do a straight reboot of it. I don't know how you would get Robert Englund involved. I mean, he's the most kind of tied and iconic for the character. I would love to see it. But
I don't. The voice or something. I don't know.
Maybe the voice. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm just feeling like one of the failures of the remake was that I don't think anybody has in their mind replaced Robert Englund with Jackie Earle
Absolutely
Haley.
not.
That's a tall order. More so than who's going to be Jason, who's going to be Michael Myers, who's going to play Freddy is a real performance. I mean, they've got a face and a voice, and it really matters to the feel of the movie.
Yeah, that's probably the one I need to see the most personally, just because I mean, it might be my favorite franchise, but I just think that. Man, the charge out of seeing Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger again would be top tier for me. Like, that would be amazing. I just don't know if he would do it again, want to do it, how long he could do it. Right. He's older and he's still got the voice down, obviously. And
now he just sounds like that.
Yeah, right. It's just natural. But I don't know. I don't know what the inroad is there, because that story is so cool that I just think that and the remakes kind of sort of flirted with it a little bit and had a moment where they kind of toyed with the idea of like maybe he didn't do the things that they thought he was doing, like that the parents that killed Fred Krueger, like that he was innocent of that stuff, and that would have been an interesting take in terms of his revenge for it all. But then they just completely sidestepped that and went right back to him being all the bad things that they thought he was. But I don't know. I hope they come up with a cool idea. I've read many of rumors, like Elijah Wood's company has like a hand in it or a take on it, and Mike Flanagan has a take on it. Nick Costa has a take on it. Like all these people, I would love to see whatever they want to do, because these are like three, value brands that I would be, I would say I think Nightmare would be in good hands for any of them. but I really hope they get Nightmare figured out, and Friday the 13th. But Nightmare is the priority, if you ask me. Yeah. So again, Halloween Ends. It's on Peacock and it's in theaters right now. If you want to check it out. I'll just go over a couple. And I know. Did you see anything else you wanted to mention, Ronald? John, I had a couple one I wanted to just rattle off real quick.
Just one. Spider-Man No Way Home Extended Edition that just came out on PVOD this week. Is it worth investing the money for PVOD?
Is it worth it?
Is it worth it?
That's the real question right there.
Yeah.
I would flip it and reverse it and rewatch this.
You would, okay.
With the extended.
Okay, that's what I was getting.
No, it's not enough.
Ronald, with digital media, you don't have to flip it and reverse it. You can just.
You don't even have to.
It's not two-sided.
Yeah. Right.
That's so crazy.
You might be doing a lot more with your gear than you need to.
A little too extra. But yeah, they have a rapper that they've added to this movie that is really interesting. I won't give anything away, but they really do highlight the students at the school and the employees at the school. And that becomes kind of a rapper throughout the film. They also extend some of the conversation between the three Spider-Man. So like the scene where they're up on the scaffolding lasts for a little longer. So everybody gets some extra lines. So you see like Electro get extra lines, and Jamie Foxx is really good. He really did redeem himself. It felt like the redemption movie for all these characters, man. Not that they were bad either way. It just felt special. I don't know if I'd spend the 15. It's 15. That just feels very pricey right now. So I would maybe rent it, and then if you like it, then add it to your collection. But it's a whole $15 if you want to buy it. To rent, I think it's like maybe $6.99 or something like that. But it's beautiful. It's a beautiful movie with a lot of extra stuff. I think the running time is like 2:38 or something like that. I think if they had like 10 more minutes or something. So it's I think it's worth checking out, especially if you like the movie and you remember it like maybe by heart. You'll be surprised to see the cool extra things, the random jokes by Hannibal Buress, things like that they've kind of put into this film. So
well, I don't even remember it that much by heart. I loved it when I saw it the first time, haven't seen it since, and have sort of looked back to it repeatedly as like the last Marvel movie that felt like an event that kind of closed the deal for me and for the crowd I was seeing it with, so I have really warm feelings towards that movie.
It's a special one, man.
Thanks for the rec. Steve, you had a couple things you wanted to
I just wanted to say I finally saw Smile. Definitely wanted to recommend that.
Okay.
I think you talked about it before, John, briefly, but
I didn't see it. So
you didn't see it. What did you see? Oh, you saw Barbarian. That's right.
Yeah.
No, I haven't seen Barbarian yet, but that comes out next week on HBO Max.
Nice.
But yeah, I finally got to see Smile. I thought it was great. Definitely that's the one over this season that is like overperforming, holding. It's
great word of mouth too.
Like a crazy word of mouth horror hit. Yeah.
The movie itself is a great word.
Not a perfect movie, not the second coming of horror, but like just a really, really great, solid horror movie at the right time of year. Great performance. Sosie Bacon, who plays the lead, Kevin Bacon, Keira Sedgwick's daughter, by the way. She's really good in the movie. And like the movies, again, we just mentioned like, trauma and mining that in horror. And this idea of this movie kind of being like a mashup of The Ring kind of meets It Follows, if that sounds interesting to you.
It does.
Or piques your interest and you haven't seen it yet, I definitely recommend go checking it out. You don't need to watch any trailers. It's just a really great lower budget horror movie that's overperforming and audiences are loving. So if it looks like it's on your radar, see it in theaters while you can.
The opposite of Halloween Ends.
Yes, it is a really good watch too with a crowd. It's got some good scares. It's got some jump scares in it. Like all of them have, but just some really creepy imagery and really kind of goes for it in some of the scenes that it's, for a studio R horror film. Yeah, I really liked it. And then if you're looking for something else at home, hasn't been mentioned on the podcast yet, if you have Shudder, there's a movie that's on there called Deadstream that I wanted to definitely give some love to. It's directed by Joseph and Vanessa Winter. I think I heard about it after it played at Fantastic Fest, but it's a found footage kind of horror movie where this internet personality is trying to win back his fan base. He's kind of gone through something with a YouTube type channel where he got canceled, uncanceled, and he's trying to go. He does all these crazy things on his channel, challenging his biggest fears. And it's like some of it's questionable, but the last thing he's trying to do is to go into this haunted house and have a live stream session.
I saw this.
with oh, you saw it? Okay.
Yeah, I really like this movie.
Yeah, where he's kind of like, he sets out rules for himself. He like removes his car keys and his batteries from his car so he can't go anywhere. And, he's kind of interacting with his following online, and obviously shit goes wrong. And it's just very, if you're a fan of Evil Dead 2, mash that up with a found footage horror movie, and it's this movie. Very funny, very short. It's quick. It's like 80 minutes or something. And I think this filmmaking, they're husband and wife, and I think they have a film or one of the segments, or maybe he just acts in it. In the VHS 99 that's coming out when this podcast drops, also on Shudder, which hopefully I'll be able to check out soon. But Joseph Winter is the co-director and star of the film. And I think he is either directing or starring in a segment from the new VHS film as well. But yeah, if you have Shudder and if that sounded interesting, found footage horror, kind of like the humor and the gore gaggy sight gags of Evil Dead 2. Yeah, if that sounds fun, I had a lot of fun with it. And it's again, it's 80 minutes. It's easy to watch. And it's pretty, there's really no fat on it. I mean, it moves quick. So I wanted to recommend that as well. And then just one last thing. AMC has the new Interview with the Vampire series they launched a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. I've been watching that, and I'm kind of loving it so far. It's only 3 or 4 episodes into the season, but it's already been renewed for a second season. So if you fan of vampire horror, Anne Rice, the film Interview with the Vampire, any of that stuff, definitely want to recommend the new series, which is over on AMC. If you're looking for something to watch this Halloween season, and you have that platform.
Cool.
That's where I'm at.
Maybe we can check that out, Ronald, and we can talk about that next time. Along with, I was just realizing after our next episode, or after this weekend, House of the Dragon will have finished its first season, and we've just had Rings of Power. So maybe next time we can do we can compare notes on how these fantasy series wrapped up.
Okay.
Their first seasons, and we'll be talking about what's the movie that you chose, Ronald? Just as a reminder to everybody.
Serpent and the Rainbow.
Serpent and the Rainbow, yes, the Wes Craven movie.
I gotta hit you with something, Steve. You know what starts this week, right? Gangs of London
season 2.
Season 2.
I'm on that.
Oh,
you gotta subscribe to their podcast too, just to give them a shout out. They have a companion pod for the
They have a companion. Don't tell me that. What's the name of it?
They do. It's really good too. Corin Hardy is like the host of it, and like it's great.
Okay.
I'm trying to give a shout on our own podcast. It's Inside Gangs of London.
They probably refer to Movie Schmovie all the time.
Yeah, I'm just trying to pay. I'm just reciprocating.
Well, maybe we could talk about that too. And if anybody manages to see Black Adam, I guess we can talk about that too.
I want to see Black Adam so bad.
I can't believe it's here after all this ridiculous hype. I mean, not because I'm like particularly like at the edge of my seat, but I am expecting it to be a spectacle and to have some cool things that I'm gonna enjoy in it. But I have such non-feelings about this movie, and it's so strange because there's been nothing but hype, and
it feels like an underperform. It really does.
Like when something like this is gone though. Like I like it when it's come and gone, so that I can not hear hype about it anymore.
Yeah.
But I mean, I hope it's good, just because I hope that DC has a way forward, and some of the things that have been massively spoiled about this movie, which are strange, seems like the fun of seeing it has been ruined a little bit by some of the spoilers that are all over social media, but I like where it suggests they might be heading with some of this stuff. But I think in general, we've talked about the franchise fatigue, everything that's true of Marvel and Star Wars and DC. Sure. It's like there's a certain amount of, at this point, we're all kind of taking it project by project. And if something comes out and it knocks you on your ass, like Werewolf by Night, we all enjoyed that. Totally. I'm going to love it. And the rest of the time, I'm going to be sort of, it feels a little bit like homework sometimes to keep up with it all.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to let them do that to my, I'm going to try to watch things I'm interested in watching, not things I feel like I have to watch. So anyway, so that's a loaded show next time.
Yeah, man, that's a big show.
Yeah. Lots of TV and the Serpent and the Rainbow. Can't wait to watch that again.
So moviesmovie.com is the website. Hit it up. You can subscribe to the podcast on the platform of your choice. You can hit the social media links there as well, and of course the YouTube page you can link there for that if you want to subscribe to the video portion of the podcast. If you do subscribe, make sure you hit that bell so you get notifications when these new videos drop. I don't know. I think that's all we got this week, guys. That was a good episode. Thanks for listening. As always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.